Okay, so for in general, it's usually a rule in scrims that you don't talk about kind of what's going wrong until you can actually review the gameplay afterwards. Because as kind of an individual playing the game, it's nearly impossible to self-assess what's going wrong on kind of like a macro level, and the macro level interactions are going to be the number one like primary reason as to why you're losing the fight. So nobody accused anybody of kind of like being the reason that the fight was lost, which was good, right? But there was the suggestion to swap onto the Roadhog. And generally, I'm not saying that it's bad for like ranked or something, and usually you're going to be right about those calls. But when you are playing in a team and setting, it's usually poor etiquette. The thing that you're going to want to primarily communicate when you're losing a fight is kind of what is affecting you, kind of like what you know with certainty to be true. If you suggest, like if you're the main tank and you suggest that the off tank switches from Diva to Roadhog, for example, in your perspective, that's correct, right? But if the Diva thinks that they're doing really well, or from their perspective, it wasn't their fault, it was somebody else, then they're going to be kind of like either in a situation where it's like, no, fuck you, I'm doing fine, or sure, I'll do it, but begrudgingly because I'm pretty sure I'm not the problem. It's sort of this thing. So when you are talking about what went wrong and what needs to change, focus in on primarily what you need to do. So if like, we'll just keep with the Reinhardt, for example. You're like, I really need help against this Mei, for example. And you're like, I need help with this, or can anybody, like, what can we do about this Mei? Really making, my life shit. Then other people, everybody who's kind of like the other five people on your team will be able to be like, I could do this, or, I'm really struggling to find value on my pick, but if I go here, if I play, McCree, for example, instead of Tracer, maybe I can give the Mei a tougher time. And if they were already struggling on Tracer themselves and thinking about what they needed to do differently in order to try and win the game, maybe you gave them a clue as to what needs to happen in order to be victorious. But when you are kind of critiquing mid-game, especially what went wrong and what went right, keep your own kind of suggestions to what directly affects you. It's also going to be people just in general want to feel like they're in control of their own decisions. So make sure that you are more or less, what you're trying to do is supply information to people so that they can make the correct decisions themselves. And what you can do is if you yourself are struggling but don't know what you need to change, ask somebody who's like, I don't think Reinhardt's working. You guys, is there something I should be playing instead? Just asking something like that. If somebody's like, oh man, I really wish I had like a Winston diving me or something like that, that could be something that comes up. But yeah, any questions about that? Just general kind of team play etiquette?
I did not know that. What about when I was asking Suna about Brig swapping? Because I would have swapped to her if she wasn't confident.
Yeah, so that stuff's fine. Like you can always,
Okay.
you can always kind of like phrase it as like, or if I don't ever want to direct a support to change something, but if you think that it is going to be a good swap, it's kind of like instead of saying can you swap Brig or swap Brig, just be like, what do you think about swapping Brig? And then you're also in the response. That's kind of encouraging the kind of response where you're going to hear about how that person is feeling, right? They're kind of like, no, I'm really liking my Lucio pick because we need speed, or like, or they'll be like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. I'll give it a shot or something. But try and give your kind of suggestions if you do have them, not as imperative directives or anything, but kind of suggestions in a way that the other person shares their thought process so that you can also gain more information about how the game is happening at a macro level. You really need to share your experiences of what you're struggling with, what you're doing really well on, so that the entire team kind of knows how to adjust together.